I was never really a target audience for Call of Duty because I never really played multiplayer or even co-op modes. But I got interested in the series after hearing a lot of positive stuff about, well, the first two, but mostly about Modern Warfare, the Call of Duty 4. And after starting the first real mission of the game, Crew Expandable, I got incredibly excited about it. I really wanted to check all the previous games and see what happens then. So I checked Call of Duty 1 and I checked Call of Duty 2. And then after Modern Warfare 2 and Black Ops, especially Black Ops, I just lost interest. Recently I saw the decline in popularity, so to speak. I mean, Call of Duty has been for a long time something like it was cool to hate it. But I decided to check back on some of the games that I have actually missed for the last, 4 years or so, specifically the campaigns, and decided to check on the remaster of Modern Warfare 1 as kind of an example of where I started to play these games. And it's interesting to see that despite this cool to hate attitude and despite the fact that people seem to think that it's the same thing every time, every single Call of Duty game actually tried something new, or at least new for itself. It never really innovated, I guess, apart from the actually first games, which brought in the popularity of these scripted modern military or World War II shooters. But since then, they always try to change something in the formula, and when they do, usually something good happens and something else breaks completely. I will focus only on single player. I never, as I said, really played multiplayer, co-op, zombie mode, whatever. I'm not interested. So I'm covering just the experiments and the attempts at doing something good with campaigns, single player campaigns only. And going back to the Crew Expandable is actually quite interesting because it feels like one of the best examples of what actually works in Call of Duty campaigns. It is a linear, scripted, very tightly made and directed experience, and it's amazing at that. You actually want to play along with the game because of how awesome it feels, and all the limitations in terms of where you can go and what you can do are natural. They're just not invisible walls, they're actual barriers you can see. So you never really feel like there's this get back to the combat zone where the game just tells you no, you can't go there. You don't think you can go somewhere else and you don't want to go somewhere else. And the main reasons I feel for the failures in campaigns in all the other Call of Duty games is actually poor scripting or poor attempts at giving you more freeform levels. Because Call of Duty is a summer blockbuster kind of thing in campaigns. The more memorable scenes it has, the better the flow between those scenes, the better the game. And Call of Duty 1, especially 2, Modern Warfare 1 and Modern Warfare 2 understood this pretty well. They had shortcomings, of course. They had repeatable things that were too predictable and too boring. But at the same time, they knew how to make things memorable. They also understood how to build stories in an interesting way. Characters had something memorable about them that wasn't force-fed to the players. They learned why, say, Captain Price is a cool dude by seeing him in action and learning things about him, instead of just being told that he's a cool dude and then expecting you to like him as a character. They learned about why villains were bad guys by seeing them do bad villainy things. All the things like this were nicely paced without too much boring watching and narration parts, and a good balance of scene and interacting. even if those interactions were highly scripted. Of course, the original World War II games didn't need as much of that since, it's well established in most people's heads by now why World War II was a pretty horrible thing and why Nazism was pretty horrible, and how difficult the struggle of Allied forces and Soviet forces was. But even with that, Call of Duty 1 and 2 tried to introduce more personal stories to show that and to make you care about that. But with the switch to the alternate history, modern and future days, they needed this extra time to flesh out the events, the characters, the stakes that are happening, and Modern Warfare 1 and 2 shine at that point. Most others that follow actually fail. So let's see what each campaign after Modern Warfare 2 tried. Black Ops tried to go with this interesting visual presentation and a lot of shock value stuff. It had brutal kills, it had horrible things, it had wow, you didn't expect that moments, but it was all rather poorly scripted and it was hammy and dumb, which kind of killed a lot of the fun about it. Modern Warfare 3 hangs mostly on the established characters, but is poor at telling a story of its own. It just reuses the things from before without really knowing how and why to do that, and it's poorly paced. Black Ops 2 had a poor story, but here is where they first tried something actually interesting and new by giving you the kind of choose your own adventure elements, where player performance in the game, player actions in the game changed the story. It even added an additional set of missions that played kind of like real-time strategy that also affected the story. It wasn't really interesting campaign, but those elements felt like, yes, this is the right step. And then Ghosts happened, which is probably the most boring and horrible game in the series so far, because nothing of note is happening, and yet the game tries to tell a story that just tells, hey, this is important and that character is important, but without ever giving you a reason to care about them. But it had one interesting level on it, I guess, which was nice, but other than that, it's really horrible. And then Advanced Warfare happens, which is probably the best campaign since Modern Warfare 2 to this day. It's predictable, it's full of really horrible QTEs, and it has press F to pay respect. Yes, we all know that by now, but apart from looking good, in fact probably better than the games that followed, the direction was really well, the characters were actually quite memorable, and of course Kevin Spacey is fantastic because he's Kevin Spacey. Now, a lot of things could be still improved, and it seemed to have some story points that weren't really fleshed out well, like something about the hand being important without really kind of showing it being very important psychologically or anything, and then focusing on it in really silly way. But it's a game that if you want a cool Call of Duty single player experience, it's a game that's definitely worth trying. Black Ops 3 as a campaign game, on the other hand, is absolutely terrible. It's really curious in how it tried to actually combine co-op, multiplayer and campaign in one huge thing that has common elements, and it tried to focus on special abilities. But the problem with the campaign specifically was that it was incredibly dumb. It was a plot twist on a plot twist of a plot twist without real reason to care about any of them. And it was hammy and stupid and dumb and pointless. And while it actually tried to add another cool element to the series, that is, it actually made the main character customizable and gave them more talking presence, although talking presence was in Advanced Warfare already, it's just completely not worth it for single player. And finally, Infinite Warfare is kind of sad. Because it has space, it's the future, you basically cosplay as horrible Commander Shepard from Mass Effect and fly in space jets, which could be cool, right? And it's a good idea, but it's so boring and kind of passable. Ultimately, it's not as completely pointless as Ghosts, sure, but it has really dumb moments in storytelling. It doesn't tell anything particularly interesting. All the secondary missions are completely unimportant for the story for some reason, despite the fact that they should be important. And also it has a lot of really dumb moments, to the point where it even has this moment that has been lambasted in movies since early 90s, where a not really important character suddenly gets in the spotlight and says, "I'm so glad to be here," to die literally 15 seconds later. You just cannot not laugh at that. And they're shown as some dramatic thing. It also has a robot called Ethan that a bit reminded me of Ctrl-Alt-Delete webcomic. Yeah, but it's just an attempt to be what I think people expect from something like Star Citizen, but just being Call of Duty, and it's surprisingly boring. It would be a completely pointless release, in fact, apart from the fact that it includes Modern Warfare 1 Remaster. And replaying Modern Warfare 1 again, a game that I never particularly loved, that I've played once already, I enjoyed it a lot, and made me realize just how much smarter the campaign design is in it compared to what happened after that. I mean, sure, for each crew expendable or Chernobyl levels or nuclear explosion part, or the air support mission, or any other memorable missions that you probably think of when you think Modern Warfare 1, it has forgettable runs through some countries you probably never even paid attention, which is with people you don't really care about and don't remember, and shooting at enemies that look kind of like your allies. Because I mean, the realistic shooters, so to speak, even though they're not really realistic, are not really fun by nature. It doesn't have all the exciting elements that could be made in, in Doom or Shadow Warrior or Wolfenstein, Borderlands even, classic Duke Nukem. Hell, even Bulletstorm, which kind of plays out a bit like a grumpy Space Marine thing, is much more creative in weapons and things that happen that you simply cannot do in a modern military shooter. But in Modern Warfare 1, this stuff is forgivable because it flows so well and constantly gives you moments that you actually remember, or even character quips that for no real reason just get stuck in your head.
People used to live in the city. Now it's a ghost town. Never seen anything like it.
And after spending an entire week playing Call of Duties, from Ghosts and upwards, I just didn't expect to enjoy a game like this. I thought that a game from nearly 10 years ago that sent the military scripted shooter thing going would feel outdated and boring by now, but instead it feels fresher and better made than some of its sequels. There are by now enough good elements in Call of Duty campaigns to truly move the series forwards, like this interactivity part from Black Ops 2, actually good story from Advanced Warfare, the customizability from Black Ops 3, stuff like that, and additional elements of how people actually move through the level. It can be improved significantly, but I just doubt anyone will try, because it's not really a focus in Call of Duties. All the season passes, all the DLCs are about multiplayer and co-op, so why improve something that brings least amount of money? And especially when about, 3 companies are doing them by now? And yet, I remain somehow hopeful that Call of Duty games would actually be fun again, because they can be. And you know, there's always time for this kind of summer blockbustery, dumb but not entirely dumb, and fun action thing happening, even in games. So, yeah, I hope they figure it out.